Who's in and who's out? A third congressional district seat in North Texas will become open next year, while a fourth member of Congress had a change of heart. One-on-one, we speak with Senator John Cornyn about federal government funding, the Israel-Hamas war, and border security. Crucial vote. The Texas House is set to decide whether to pass a school choice or voucher bill. Will rural Republicans change their minds and approve it this time? I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics starts right now. Hello and welcome. We begin with the political who's in and who's out. There will be 3 congressional seats from North Texas up for grabs next year. On Monday, Republican Michael Burgess announced he won't run for re-election and will retire when his term expires at the end of next year. Burgess has been in Congress since 2003, representing the 26th District, which covers parts of Denton, Cook, Tarrant, and Wise counties. We'll hear from Burgess coming up a little later. After serving in Congress for more than 25 years, Kay Granger of Fort Worth announced earlier this month that she won't seek re-election. The Republican Congresswoman represents District 12, which includes the western half of Tarrant County and most of Parker County. And Democrat Colin Allred of the 32nd Congressional District, which covers northeastern Dallas County, is leaving his seat to challenge Republican Senator Ted Cruz. But briefly this week, for less than 24 hours, it appeared there would be a 4th congressional seat up for grabs. Republican Pat Fallon announced Monday that he wouldn't be running for re-election for his seat in the 4th congressional district. He filed paperwork to run for his old state Senate seat. On Monday, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick even endorsed Fallon, posting on social media, quote, "Voters of District 30 couldn't ask for a better candidate." But the very next day, Fallon changed his mind, and he is now running for re-election to Congress. As far as who will be replacing these members of Congress, we already have an idea of who could be running. For Burgess's seat, which will likely remain Republican, at least one candidate has announced he's running for Texas' 26th Congressional District, U.S. Navy veteran and Republican Burt Thacker. In District 12, another GOP seat, at least 4 Republicans are vying to replace Congresswoman Granger, including Texas Representative Craig Goldman and Tarrant County businessman John O'Shea. And 12 candidates have announced they're running for Allred's seat in District 32, which will likely remain Democratic, including Dallas surgeon Brian Williams and State Representative Julie Johnson. Candidates have until 6 p.m. December 11th to file their paperwork. Now to the Texas Capitol, where the full House is now considering a very contentious and controversial bill that hasn't been debated on the House floor in about 20 years. The measure would provide taxpayer money for some students to attend private school. In addition, the legislation would boost funding for school districts and for teacher pay raises. As we've reported, there's a lot of pressure on the House Republicans who oppose school choice or vouchers. We spoke with one North Texas lawmaker who remains against it.
Personally, I have heartburn over the education savings accounts and vouchers.
Representative Justin Holland says using taxpayer money to help pay for kids to go to private school isn't responsible.
As constitutional conservatives, one of the main questions I ask myself is it conservative to have a general revenue expansion of government to the tune of $500 million to $1 billion over the next few years for just a few students in the state of Texas to take advantage of?
Under House Bill 1, eligible students could receive up to $10,000 a year to go to private school. Lower income and disabled students would be favored. The Texas House estimates that the cost of the education savings accounts alone would start at more than $461 million in 2025 and rise to $2.3 billion in 2028. Do you think there are enough votes in the House this time around to pass it?
I do not.
Why not?
Because I can count.
Holland, some other Republicans, and Democratic lawmakers have blocked this for years because they worry the school districts will lose money when some of their students go to private schools instead.
Vouchers have been dead in the Texas House since 1957, and they ain't coming back anytime soon.
Supporters of education savings accounts have a message for their fellow Republicans who oppose school choice.
If you continue taking your orders from the liberal teacher unions. You're turning your back on the voters that put you in office.
The House bill also includes more money for school districts and teacher pay raises. And Representative Holland says lawmakers need to focus on teachers.
We need to pay them. We need to make sure that they're bonused appropriately, and that these school districts who have passed deficit budgets get an increase in basic allotment so that they can fund these budgets.
The Senate passed two separate education bills last week. We're also keeping track of other legislation. Earlier this week, the House approved SB 3, which provides $1.5 billion to extend the state's border wall. The lower chamber also passed SB 4, which makes it a state crime for a migrant to enter Texas illegally. The Senate gave the green light for both measures last week. Both go to Governor Abbott's desk for him to sign. Now to the nation's capital, where Congress has averted a partial federal government shutdown. The Senate and House approved a bill that will keep the government open after 12:01 a.m. Saturday. One of the Republicans running for president appeared at the North American Blockchain Summit here in Fort Worth. Tech billionaire Vivek Ramaswamy addressed the summit at the convention center in downtown. He spoke with reporters afterwards, and he was asked about how he plans to win the first Republican contest, the Iowa caucus, even though he is in fourth place in the primary polling.
So the person who's won Iowa has almost never won the presidency. It's about beating the expectations set for you. And so right now what we're seeing on the ground is many of our supporters are people who have never voted in an Iowa caucus before. Independent-minded people that aren't the traditional, older generation Republicans. That will work in our favor. So I think we're in a position to shatter expectations in both Iowa and New Hampshire. I think America's a nation of underdogs, and so I relish being the underdog in this race right now.
Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. addressed the summit as well. Blockchain technology is an advanced database of business transactions that is secure and transparent, can't be altered, and decentralized so that individual companies and the government have no control over it. Coming up, we go one-on-one with U.S. Senator John Cornyn, why he believed all along that Congress would not allow the government to run out of money this weekend. Then later, our interview with Congressman Michael Burgess and why he decided not to run for re-election. Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas. We'll be right back.
How many times has our federal government shut down? The short answer, 10. But not all government shutdowns are created equal. Take the very first shutdown, for example. In 1980, Congress delayed funding the Federal Trade Commission. This led to the first ever shutdown of a U.S. government agency due to a lack of funding. It lasted one day and 1,600 federal workers were furloughed or temporarily laid off, costing our government $700,000 and halting all FTC business, including antitrust investigations and active consumer protection cases. But that seems mild compared with some recent shutdowns, like in 2018 when federal agencies furloughed 380,000 workers for more than a month. President Trump asked for $5.7 billion to fund a border wall between the U.S. and Mexico, but Democrats said the wall would be a waste of money and wouldn't adequately address the issue of border security. Democrats refused to fund the bill, and the government shut down for 35 days, costing us $3 billion in back pay for workers and $2 billion in lost tax revenue. Overall, there was one shutdown under President Carter, 3 under Reagan, 1 under Bush Sr., 2 under Clinton, 1 under Obama, and 2 under President Trump.
Welcome back to Eye on Politics. We now know there won't be a government shutdown. And in an interview earlier this week, U.S. Senator John Cornyn predicted there wouldn't be one. He explained why he felt that way and discussed the Israel-Hamas war, anti-Semitism, Ukraine, and illegal immigration at the southern border.
Winston Churchill once famously said that the Americans always do the right thing after they've exhausted every other possibility. And Congress has exhausted every other possibility other than actually dealing with the problem. And so I think a shutdown is highly unlikely. No one benefits from that. We don't save any money. We actually spend more money. And the same problems that cause you to shut down are there staring you in the face when you reopen. So I'm pretty optimistic about that. How we get there may get kind of tricky, but I think we will get there.
There have been an increasing number of people calling for a ceasefire by Israel. What's your thought on that?
I do not support a ceasefire. That's like somebody punching you in the face, Jack, and then when you try to defend yourself, said, "No, you can't do that." Literally, Hamas is a Iranian proxy. Iran, of course, is the #1 state sponsor of international terrorism. Hamas is a United States government designated terrorist organization. And what they did on October the 7th was beyond barbaric. And I believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu and the leadership in Israel needs to eliminate that threat. They've tried to coexist with Hamas in Gaza and trying to make that work. Obviously, that does not work. And Iran saw an opportunity to encourage its proxy, Hamas, to kill innocent civilians and to abduct hostages, men, women, and children. We've all seen those horrific pictures. So I believe we need to give Israel the space and the time they need to eliminate that threat.
And what do you make of the rising anti-Semitism on college campuses and just on some of the streets across the country?
Well, it's very troubling because I think really what it does is it calls into question our basic values as human beings. People choosing sides on choosing the side of a terrorist organization against innocent civilians, women and children being abducted, killed, beheaded. I don't understand that. Unfortunately, I think this may speak to some of the conditions at our college campuses where some people are encouraged to believe in these causes and disregard the consequences. I'm all for free speech. I'm all for people being able to express themselves, but how anyone could condone what has happened to Israel on October the 7th is beyond me.
And going back to border security, you mentioned there's a bipartisan group of senators right now working on changing the asylum, and you spoke to that a little bit earlier. What's your sense on whether this is going to pass? Because you have some members of the House who said, they need to basically shut down the border. They take a very different stance on this. And so I'm wondering, how is this all going to shake out? Because there hasn't been any agreement on how to deal with immigration and what's going on at the southern border for decades.
Yeah, Jack, this is a very different negotiation from what we've had in the past. The fact of the matter is the administration wants funding for Ukraine. I happen to support continued funding for Ukraine because I worry that Mr. Putin will not stop in Ukraine, and then he'll engage one of the NATO countries with which we are allied and invoke a provision of that treaty, which will require us to get directly involved in that conflict. So, but this is something that is going to be the price for getting that done. It also will grow the support for the Ukraine funding because there are a number of people who said this is their #1 priority, dealing with the border. And this isn't just money that will help facilitate the current policies. We need to change some of those policies. For example, the catch and release policies of the Biden administration, which has just encouraged more and more people to come to the United States. There's a reason why we are seeing historic numbers of people at our border. It's because there is no deterrence. There are no consequences associated with illegally coming to the United States and entering the country. And in effect, President Biden has outsourced our immigration system to drug cartels and criminal organizations, and it has to stop.
And I wanted to also ask you about, Texas right now has a lawsuit against the Biden administration. There are a variety of them, but specifically with regards to the feds tearing apart some of the razor wire, the barbed wire that the state has put up along the border. What's your thought on that?
Well, the state of Texas has a right to defend itself and its sovereignty, and that's what Governor Abbott and the Texas leaders are doing in the absence of any real support from the federal government. And we bear a disproportionate burden of the consequences of failing to secure the border and failing to eliminate illegal immigration and drug smuggling into the United States. So I certainly believe Texas has every right to do this. And unfortunately, it's because President Biden is not doing his job.
Coming up, North Texas Republican Congressman Michael Burgess tells us why he's not running for re-election. Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas. We'll be back in a moment. As we told you earlier, North Texas Republican Congressman Michael Burgess announced this week he won't run again next year. His seat will become the third one up for grabs in 2024. Burgess, a medical doctor, has been in Congress since 2003, and he told us why he decided this was the right time to leave.
Well, the decision itself actually came about pretty quickly. I mean, as you know, the filing period opened up on the 11th, which was a Saturday. On Sunday, my wife and I sat down and really had the intense talk about the pros and cons of running for another term. It's something I go through have gone through every year. You want to look at what the reasons are to run, and if there are reasons not to run, you want to think of those as well. So it really, putting it together Sunday evening, it seemed like it was the logical decision to make. And I've heard people tell me before, you'll know when it's time, and it just felt like it was time.
And was there anything in particular that made you feel that it was time?
Well, look, it's no secret in this political season, there's been a lot of talk about the age of representatives and candidates. And I am getting to that point myself. I don't know how many years I have left, but do I want to invest what I have left in what's going on up here? And maybe not. I've served, and I hope I've served well. And it's time to let someone else take the reins.
And along those lines, did 2024 and the outcome of the House itself, in other words, were Republicans going to retain the House in 2024, or are they going to lose it and be back in the minority? Did that play any role in your decision?
No, not really. I mean, I've served in the minority here before. That's not I don't intend for Republicans to be in the minority after the 2024 elections. The times past, when there has been a change, when there's been a shift in the political makeup of the House, you can kind of tell going into it. This time, in my opinion, there is no indication that things are going to change significantly. So I would expect Republicans to be in the majority in the next Congress.
You spoke about the decision that you and your wife, you had this big talk on Sunday morning. It seemed as if that, people were surprised by this decision. It seems like you didn't really let on to anybody until you made that announcement. Is that right?
No, that's right. You know how things are, and the minute people start talking about something, then it becomes it takes on a life of its own. I knew that if this was going to be the decision, I was home. I was in Texas. I knew I needed to talk to my staff and let them know what I was doing and why I was doing it. I wanted to have that talk first, and I did. I came back to Washington and had the entire DC staff in the office, and we put the district staff on the speakerphone, so everybody heard what I had to say at the same time. And yeah, I expect it did catch some people off guard. No one was actually expecting that to be the subject of the meeting. But again, Jack, when it's time, you just know it's time. But I feel very good from the standpoint. Look, I was cruising into a re-election with no significant primary opponent. I actually had a lot potentially ahead of me in the next Congress. I'll probably be the top Republican on the Rules Committee, chairman if we retain the majority. So there were a lot of things to look forward to. At the same time, I am getting older. As my wife pointed out, my grandsons need me and need my participation in their lives much more than they ever have before. And quite honestly, this job is hard on your family. And my wife has given up a lot for me to have this time in service. And it was time to draw it to a close. But I would just stress there was nothing that was forcing me to make the decision. Again, I had probably one of the clearest political runways ahead of me that I've ever had. No opposition had identified itself. Even times past, I've had 3 or 4 primary opponents, but didn't seem that way this time. And it's just a good feeling to go out on top, and no one's pushing you out. You go out on your own terms.
Burgess will serve out the remainder of his term, which expires at the end of next year. And don't forget, you can watch his full interview along with Senator Cornyn's on our website, cbsnewstexas.com. That's all for Eye on Politics this week. I'm Jack Fink. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you again next week. You're watching CBS News Texas.